My name is Tiffany Gordon, and at 36, I stood on the stage at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, holding tightly to my master's degree in law. 4 long years of exhausting nights and weekends that I had given up were all behind me, and this was supposed to be the moment that made every sacrifice worth it. I had imagined this day over and over during those sleepless nights, picturing the applause, the smiles, the feeling that everything I had worked for had finally come together. As I stood there under the bright lights of the auditorium, I searched the crowd for the familiar faces of my parents, Deborah and Edward Gordon. I wanted to see them smiling proudly, maybe even waving or taking photos like so many other parents were doing for their children. Instead, my eyes landed on 3 empty seats in the section where they had promised they would sit. The sight of those empty chairs hit me harder than I expected. They hadn't shown up. Not even for this. I had prepared for this day for months. I sent them the exact date of the ceremony, the start time, and even a map showing the location of the auditorium on campus so they wouldn't get lost. My mother had sounded supportive when we talked about it. "We're so proud of you, Tiffany," she had told me. Her voice was warm, but there had been something distracted about it, like her thoughts were already somewhere else entirely. Then came the excuse that they were simply too busy to make it. Busy doing what? Attending a small celebration at my sister Shannon's house? She had just landed a new contract as a freelance event planner and wanted to celebrate. Apparently, that gathering mattered more than my graduation ceremony. A simple party somehow outweighed the moment I had spent 4 years working toward. Deep down, I had hoped that earning this degree would finally make them acknowledge how hard I had worked. I thought maybe they would see me differently. I thought maybe it would make them proud in the way they always seemed to be proud of Shannon. But standing there, looking at those empty seats, I realized how wrong I had been. When I stepped down from the stage after receiving my diploma, my phone vibrated inside my purse. I reached in and saw a new message from my mother. "We need to talk, urgently." Before I could even process that, another notification popped up. My father had called me again and again, 30 missed calls in the span of less than an hour. My heart started pounding immediately. Something didn't feel right. A cold sense of dread crept in as I stared at the screen. Whatever was happening, it felt serious. I had no idea that only minutes later, my entire life was about to shift in ways I never expected. Have you ever had your family overlook you on a day that meant everything to you? If you have, share your story in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I'm curious to see just how far this story reaches. For the past decade, I've been living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Over those 10 years, I slowly built a quiet, independent life for myself in a modest 1-bedroom apartment just outside the downtown area. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and it represents years of effort and persistence. I work as a junior lawyer at a small firm called Harper & Stone. Our office handles family law disputes and estate planning cases. The work isn't glamorous at all. Most days are filled with long hours reviewing contracts, mediating tense divorce proceedings, and drafting wills for clients who sometimes argue over the smallest details of inheritance. But despite all of that, I genuinely love what I do. The work requires precision and patience, and it keeps pushing me toward my long-term goal of opening my own law practice one day. My dream is to build a firm where I can focus on cases that actually matter to me, especially helping single parents who are fighting for custody or trying to protect their children during difficult separations. That vision has been the fuel that kept me moving forward through some of the hardest years of my life. My parents, Deborah and Edward Gordon, live about an hour away from Charlotte in the same quiet suburb where I grew up. They still live in the old split-level house that holds all of our childhood memories. Both of them are retired now. My mother spent years working as a school secretary, while my father worked as a mechanic. These days, they spend their time tending to their garden, attending church events, and most importantly, keeping up with the busy life of my older sister, Shannon. Shannon is 4 years older than me and works as a freelance event planner. At 40, she's always talking excitedly about her newest projects, as if they're the most talked about happenings in all of Charlotte. Her latest big accomplishment was securing a $10,000 contract to organize a relatively small wedding for a local couple. It's a nice job, sure, but the way she talks about it, you'd think she was planning a royal ceremony. My parents hang on every word she says. Whenever she talks about her events or her clients, they listen like she's a celebrity sharing stories from the red carpet. Meanwhile, my years of grinding through law school barely get more than a polite acknowledgement. Growing up, that difference in attention was always there. Shannon had a big personality. She was outgoing, charismatic, and loved being the center of every gathering. She organized backyard barbecues, school talent shows, and neighborhood parties. My parents would always gush about how creative and energetic she was. I was the opposite. I spent most of my time with books stacked around me, focusing on schoolwork and debate competitions. I brought home academic awards and perfect report cards, but those achievements never seemed to excite anyone the same way Shannon's social events did. "Shannon is just so vibrant," my mother would often say with admiration, as if my straight A's somehow carried less weight. My father would nod in agreement and add, "That girl has a spark about her." I learned pretty early that being dependable and hardworking didn't attract the same applause as being entertaining and charismatic. When I finally decided to pursue my master's degree in law, the decision wasn't only about improving my career, it was also about proving something. I wanted to prove to myself that I could reach a goal that demanded everything from me. But if I'm being honest, part of me also hoped it would finally make my parents see me differently. I enrolled in the part-time master's program at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, a program designed for people who are already working full-time. For 4 years, I lived what felt like 2 completely separate lives. During the day, I worked long hours at the law firm. Then 3 evenings every week, I rushed across town to attend classes from 6 until 9 at night. After lectures ended, I still had hours of studying ahead of me at the tiny kitchen table in my apartment. Weekends weren't much easier. While friends invited me to brunch or weekend trips, I usually ended up sitting in coffee shops surrounded by stacks of case law, highlighting paragraphs until my eyes felt raw from staring at pages for so long. I skipped birthday parties, turned down concert invitations, and avoided dating entirely because every free moment had to go toward finishing my degree. The schedule was relentless. Most mornings began at 5 o'clock so I could prepare court documents before heading into the office. After a 10-hour workday, I would rush to campus for lectures. By the time I got home each night, it was already past 10, and I still had assignments waiting for me. My survival plan became a steady supply of coffee and pure stubborn determination. My parents knew about the workload. Occasionally, they would call to check in and ask how things were going. "You're always so busy," my mother would say, but there was a tone in her voice that almost sounded like she blamed me for the chaos of my schedule. Meanwhile, Shannon filled her social media pages with photos from the event she planned: glittering centerpieces, flower arrangements on a budget, tables decorated with twinkling lights. Her captions always said things like, "living the dream." My parents left enthusiastic comments full of heart emojis under those posts, while my updates about surviving another round of exams usually received a short message like, "Good job, Tiffany." The hardest part of law school wasn't always the coursework, it was the loneliness. I often lay awake at night wondering if everything I was sacrificing would eventually matter. Would this degree finally make my parents look at me with the same pride they showed Shannon? Would they recognize that quiet persistence can be just as powerful as loud confidence? I kept telling myself it would. In my mind, I pictured the moment of graduation again and again. I imagined them sitting in the audience cheering as I crossed the stage, their faces glowing with pride. That image became the thing that pushed me through sleepless nights and impossible deadlines. Shannon's constant need to dominate every conversation made things harder. Sometimes she would call just to talk about her newest project, barely asking about my studies at all. Once, when we met for coffee, she laughed and said, "I honestly don't know how you do it, Tiffany. All that studying sounds miserable. I'd rather be out there making things happen." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit, but I brushed them aside. She simply didn't understand what it meant to build something long-term, something more meaningful than a single event that would be forgotten after one night. Still, my parents seemed completely caught up in her excitement. They would drive into Charlotte to help her set up decorations or attend meetings with her clients. Meanwhile, when I asked if they could visit me during exam season just for a quick break, I usually heard the same response. "We're tied up with Shannon's latest project," my father would say. You know how busy she gets. I tried not to let it get to me. I focused on my goal: finish the degree, pass the bar, open my own practice. I saved every extra dollar from my paycheck, building a nest egg of $60,000 to fund my dream. It wasn't easy. Charlotte's cost of living isn't cheap, and law school tuition ate up most of my disposable income. But I was determined to make it work. I told myself that once I had that degree in hand, things would change. My parents would see what I'd accomplished, and maybe, just maybe, they'd stop putting Shannon on a pedestal. Looking back, I realized how naive I was. I thought a piece of paper would shift decades of favoritism. I thought my hard work would speak louder than Shannon's showy charm. But as the months ticked by and my graduation day approached, a small part of me started to doubt. Would they really show up for me? Or would Shannon find a way to steal the spotlight again? 6 months before my graduation from my university, I started planning what I hoped would be a day I'd never forget. I wanted my parents, Deborah and Edward Gordon, to see me walk across the stage, to feel the weight of what I'd accomplished after 4 years of law school. I called my mother on a quiet Sunday afternoon, catching her as she sorted through old photo albums. "Mom, my graduation is May 15th at 2 p.m., I said, my voice tinged with excitement. "I really want you and Dad there. It means a lot to me." She paused, then said, "That sounds wonderful, Tiffany. We'll put it on the calendar." I called my father next, his voice rough from a long day in the garage. "Got it, Tiffany. Sounds good," he said. Their words felt like a promise, and I held on to them, imagining their proud faces in the crowd. I spent weeks scouring Charlotte for the perfect restaurant for a celebratory dinner after the ceremony. I settled on Luce Vita, a small Italian place downtown with warm lighting and homemade ravioli. It cost $300 to reserve a table for 4, including myself, a splurge, but I told myself it was worth it for a milestone like this. I booked it with my credit card, pushing aside the slight sting of the expense. Then I bought a dress, an emerald green sheath that cost $200. Simple but elegant, perfect for wearing under my gown and for dinner afterward. I even made a hair appointment at a salon near my apartment, a rare treat for someone who lived in practical sweaters and jeans. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of joy instead of the usual grind. I sent my parents an email with every detail: date, time, auditorium location, even a link to parking instructions on the university's website. "I can't wait for you to see me graduate," I wrote, adding a hopeful smiley face. My mother replied the next day, "So proud of you, Tiffany. Looking forward to it." My father's response was short: "Thanks for the info. See you then." I read those messages over and over, picturing them clapping as I accepted my master's degree in law. It felt like the finish line was finally in sight. 3 weeks before the big day, that hope flickered. I was at my desk reviewing a client's custody agreement when my phone pinged with a text from Shannon. "Hey, I'm throwing a small party on May 15th to celebrate a new contract," she wrote. "Just landed a $10,000 wedding gig. You should come by after work." My stomach twisted. May 15th was my graduation day. I told Shannon the date months ago over coffee when I was buzzing about finishing my degree. Had she really forgotten, or was something else going on? I called her right away, my fingers gripping the phone. "Shannon, your party's on my graduation day," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I told you the date. Can you move it to another weekend?" Her response came fast, light and careless. "Oh, Tiffany, I totally forgot. But it's not a big deal, right? It's just a ceremony. My party's for a huge career move, and I've got clients who can only make it that day." Her words hit hard, like a door slamming shut. Just a ceremony. 4 years of late nights, skipped vacations, and endless case law, reduced to nothing. I tried to reason with her. "Shannon, this is my master's degree. It's important to me."
"Can't you pick another day?" She sighed like I was making things difficult. "Tiffany, relax. I already sent invites and it's too late to change. Besides, Mom and Dad can probably do both. It'll work out." I ended the call, my throat tight with frustration. Do both. My ceremony was at 2 p.m., and her party started at 4 across town. It didn't add up. I'd hoped my parents would prioritize me, but Shannon's breezy confidence made me doubt. Was she trying to pull their attention away, like she always did with her flashy events? I didn't have proof, but the thought lingered, sharp and unsettling. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my apartment. I'd spent months imagining my parents in the audience, their faces lit up as I walked across the stage. Now I wasn't so sure. Shannon's party, her so-called huge career move, felt like a shadow creeping over my moment. I told myself they'd show up, that they wouldn't let me down. But a quiet doubt nodded at me, whispering that I might be wrong. The morning of my graduation day started with a quiet buzz of anticipation in my chest. I woke up at dawn, too restless to sleep, knowing this was the moment I'd worked 4 years to reach. I slipped into the emerald green dress I'd bought just for today, its smooth fabric a reminder of how much this milestone meant. Over it, I pulled on my black graduation gown, pinned my cap in place, and checked my reflection. The tassel swayed gently, a symbol of every late night and missed weekend I'd poured into my master's degree in law. I took a steadying breath, telling myself this day would be everything I'd hoped, no matter what.
I arrived at the campus auditorium just after 1 p.m., blending into the crowd of graduates in their identical black gowns. The air hummed with excitement, classmates posing for photos with their families, parents holding flowers, siblings waving balloons. I scanned the faces around me, searching for my mother or father, clinging to the hope that they'd show up despite Shannon's party. Maybe they'd chosen me this time, I thought, holding on to their vague promises. But as I moved through the lineup, gripping my name card, I saw no sign of them. My stomach tightened, but I pushed the doubt down, focusing on the moment. I'd earned this degree, and I was going to walk that stage. The ceremony began at 2, with graduates filing into the familiar strains of pomp and circumstance. I took my place in the alphabetical lineup, my eyes darting to the audience. The seats were packed, faces blurring under the bright lights, but none were my parents. I kept looking, telling myself they could be late, maybe stuck in traffic or circling for parking. But as the university president spoke about perseverance and new chapters, a cold realization settled in. They weren't here. They'd chosen Shannon's party over my graduation. When my name was called, Tiffany Gordon, Master of Laws with Honors, I crossed the stage, my heels steady despite the ache in my chest. I shook the dean's hand, took my diploma case, and moved my tassel from right to left. The applause was polite, the same for every graduate, but it felt empty, like it belonged to someone else's moment. No one shouted my name, no familiar cheers broke through. I forced a smile for the photographer, but the loneliness was crushing. This was my triumph, and I was facing it alone. Back at my seat, I clapped automatically for other graduates, my mind spinning. I'd given my parents every detailed date, time, and location. I'd practically begged them to come. Why weren't they here? Shannon's party, her $10,000 wedding contract, couldn't possibly outshine this. The doubt I'd felt after talking to her weeks ago sharpened, cutting deeper. Had they ever meant to show up, or was her spotlight always going to win? After the ceremony, graduates spilled onto the lawn outside, families reuniting in a burst of hugs and laughter. I stood on the sidelines, my diploma case heavy in my hands, watching parents embrace their kids and snap proud photos. I felt like an outsider in my own victory. I pulled out my phone, hoping for a text from my mother or father, an apology, an explanation, anything. There was nothing. Out of habit, I opened Instagram, scrolling through posts from classmates with their families. Then I froze. Shannon had posted a photo an hour ago, right during my ceremony. It showed my mother and father at her house, raising wine glasses in a toast with a small group. The caption read, "Celebrating my big contract win with my favorite people." My breath caught. They were there, at Shannon's party, smiling like my graduation didn't matter. I zoomed in, seeing my mother's proud smile, my father's arm around her. The hurt hit like a wave, raw and overwhelming, stealing the air from my lungs. But another feeling stirred, cold and sharp, suspicion. Shannon knew my graduation date. I told her months ago. Why had she picked today for her party? It wasn't just a coincidence. I'd been climbing in my legal career, planning to open my own practice, and she'd always seemed uneasy about it, like my success was a threat. Was this her way of keeping the focus on her, of pushing my moment into the shadows? I shoved my phone into my purse, my hands shaking. I tried to hold on to the pride of my degree, the years of work it represented. I posed for a few photos with classmates, forcing a smile as they chatted about their family plans. But that Instagram post burned in my mind, a wound I couldn't ignore. I headed to my car, the diploma case heavier than it should have been. I'd planned a dinner at La Dolce Vita, but now I wasn't sure I could face it alone. Something felt wrong, and I was starting to think Shannon had planned it that way. Leaving the campus, the diploma case on the passenger seat felt heavier than it should, weighing down the hollow moment I'd just lived through. During the ceremony, I'd been too busy crossing the stage and forcing smiles for photos to check my phone. Merging onto the highway toward my apartment, I glanced down, expecting only silence. Instead, my chest tightened. A text from my mother glowed on the screen. "We need to talk urgently." Below it, 30 missed calls from my father, all within the past hour. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as a swell of dread and confusion rose inside me. What had happened? I pulled over to a gas station, my pulse racing, and called my father back. "Dad, what's going on?" I asked, my voice unsteady. His reply came fast, strained with panic. "Tiffany, it's Shannon. She fell at her party down the stairs. She's hurt bad, in the hospital now. We need you here." My mind spun. Shannon hurt? The image of my parents toasting at her party, captured on Instagram, flashed in my head, reigniting the sting of their absence. "Which hospital?" I asked, trying to focus. He gave me the address, Carolina's Medical Center, 10 minutes away. I hung up, torn between worry and the raw hurt still burning in my chest. I drove to the hospital, the Charlotte skyline fading into dusk as my thoughts turned. Part of me wanted to turn around, to let them handle whatever mess Shannon had caused. But another part, the one still tied to family despite everything, pushed me forward. I parked and rushed to the emergency wing, my gown still folded in the back seat. In the waiting area, I found my mother and father, their faces pale and tense. "Mom, Dad, what happened?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. My mother's hands twisted a tissue, her eyes red. "Tiffany, thank God you're here. Shannon was drinking at her party, celebrating that new contract. She tripped on the stairs, fell hard. The doctors say she's got a broken femur and a mild concussion. She needs surgery. $50,000, maybe more. We don't have that kind of money." My father nodded, his voice low. "Her freelance work doesn't come with good insurance, Tiffany. We're out of options. Can you help?" I froze, their words hitting like a cold wave. $50,000. I had $60,000 saved for my law practice, every cent scraped from years of careful budgeting. They were asking me to give up my dream for Shannon, the sister who'd planned her party on my graduation day? "You're asking me to pay?" I said, my voice shaking. "After you didn't show up for my ceremony? You were at her party, smiling for photos while I stood alone on that stage." My mother flinched, her voice breaking. "Tiffany, we wanted to be there, but Shannon said her party was critical for her career. She said it was a one-time chance to impress clients, that your ceremony was just a formality. We thought you'd understand." Her words cut deeper than the empty seats had. "A formality?" I stared at her, anger flaring. "Shannon said that?" "She knew it was my graduation day. I told her months ago. Why would she call it a formality?" My mother hesitated, her eyes dropping. She said her contract was more important, that we needed to support her career. We believed her." My blood ran cold. Shannon had known exactly what my graduation meant to me. This wasn't an oversight. It felt calculated, like she planned to steal my moment. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling, remembering a message my mother had forwarded weeks ago, one I'd skimmed over during finals. I opened my email app, scrolled through my inbox, and found it. An email from Shannon to my parents, with me copied by mistake. "My party is a huge career move." It read, "Tiffany's graduation is just a formality. She won't mind if you skip it to support me." The words burned into me, undeniable proof. "Mom, you sent me this," I said, holding up my phone. "Shannon told you to skip my graduation. She'd planned this on purpose." My mother's face crumpled, her hands covering her mouth. "Tiffany, I didn't realize. I thought she was just excited about her contract."
"We're so sorry." My father stepped closer, his voice pleading. "We made a mistake, Tiffany, but Shannon needs the surgery. Please, you're our only hope." I stood there, the hospital lights buzzing overhead, torn between the family I'd tried to please and the betrayal I couldn't unsee. Shannon's email wasn't a slip. It was a deliberate move to keep my parents' focus on her, to dim my light. And now they were asking me to sacrifice my savings, my future, for her. The air felt thick, their eyes heavy on me, waiting for an answer. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding with years of being pushed aside. Standing in the hospital waiting room with my mother's apologies echoing and Shannon's email burning in my mind, I felt the weight of their betrayal heavier than ever. My parents' pleading eyes, my mother's crumpled face, my father's desperate voice. They were asking me to give up my future for the sister who deliberately tried to overshadow me. $50,000 for Shannon's surgery. It was nearly everything I'd saved. $60,000. Every penny set aside for my dream of opening my own law practice. I stood frozen, the hum of the hospital lights amplifying the storm inside me. Could I really do this for a family that had chosen her over me? I took a deep breath, my hands clenching into fists. "I'll pay for the surgery," I said, my voice low but steady. "But this is the last thing I'll ever do for this family." My mother gasped, her hand reaching for me. "Tiffany, please, we didn't mean—" I cut her off, shaking my head. "No, Mom, you made your choice. Shannon made hers. I'm done." My father's face fell, but he stayed silent, his shoulders slumping. I turned away, unable to look at them any longer, and walked to the hospital's billing office.
I arranged a bank transfer for $50,000, watching my savings, the foundation of my future, drain away with a few keystrokes. It hurt, but not as much as the years of being pushed aside. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the confirmation email from Dolce Vita for the celebratory dinner I'd planned. I'd pictured my parents there, toasting to my master's degree, but now the thought felt hollow. I called the restaurant and canceled the reservation, my voice flat as I explained I wouldn't need it anymore. The server on the line hesitated, then said, "I'm sorry, ma'am." I hung up, a strange calm settling over me. That dinner was supposed to mark a new chapter, but I realized I didn't need their approval to start it. I needed to let go. The next morning, I blocked my mother's number, my father's and Shannon's. I removed them from my email contacts, unfollowed them on social media, and deleted their messages. It wasn't just about anger. It was about protecting myself. For years, I'd chased their recognition, believing my achievements would finally make them see me.
But Shannon's email, her deliberate attempt to dim my light, and my parents' willingness to go along with it, showed me the truth. Their love came with conditions, and I was done trying to meet them. 2 weeks later, I packed up my apartment in Charlotte. I'd been researching cities for months, looking for a fresh start where I could build my law practice on my terms. Miami felt right. Vibrant, growing, with a demand for lawyers specializing in family law like me. I signed a lease for a small office space downtown, using the last $10,000 of my savings to cover the deposit and basic equipment. It was a risk, but it was mine. I hired a moving company, loaded my belongings into a truck, and drove south, leaving Charlotte behind. The skyline faded in my rearview mirror, and with it, the weight of my family's expectations. In Miami, I threw myself into work. I took on clients, single mothers fighting for custody, families navigating messy estates, and built a reputation for being tough but fair. My office was small, with mismatched furniture and a coffee machine that barely worked, but it was mine. Every case I won, every client I helped, reminded me that my worth didn't come from my parents' approval or Shannon's shadow. It came from the years I'd spent proving myself to myself. My parents tried to reach out in those first few months. My mother left voicemails I never listened to. My father sent emails I marked as spam. I heard through a distant cousin that they were struggling, cut off, not just from me, but from other relatives who'd heard about their favoritism. Family gatherings grew tense, with aunts and uncles whispering about how they'd chosen Shannon's small-time contract over my master's degree. Their social circle shrank, their pride in Shannon no longer enough to fill the void I'd left. Shannon faced her own fallout. A client at her party, a wedding planner, who'd seen her stumble and fall down the stairs, spread the story in Charlotte's tight-knit event industry. Word got around that Shannon was unprofessional, drinking too much at her own event. She lost a $15,000 contract for a corporate gala, a blow to her already shaky freelance career. With her broken femur and concussion, she couldn't work for months, relying on savings that quickly dwindled. I didn't feel joy at her struggles, but I didn't feel guilt either. She'd made her choices, just as I'd made mine. Looking back, I see now that my graduation wasn't just about a degree. It was about learning who I am when the people I love most let me down. For years, I thought their approval defined me, that if I worked hard enough, they'd see my worth. But standing alone in Miami, building my practice, I realized the truth. My value doesn't depend on them. It's in the choices I make, the boundaries I set, the life I create. I paid for Shannon's surgery not because I owed her, but because I wanted to close that chapter with no regrets. Cutting them off wasn't easy, but it was freedom. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself, to walk away from people who couldn't see your worth, I want to hear your story. How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice matters, and so does your story. Subscribe for more real stories about finding your own path.